2 months on from Red Bull's shock dismissal of Christian Horner, it's winning again, and all talk of Max Verstappen jumping ship has gone quiet. But how much can this swing be put down to the change at the top? What's actually changed under Laurent Mekies? Well, according to the man himself, zero, which isn't quite true. There are obvious changes in how Mekies operates compared to Horner, whether that be in how engineering meetings are conducted, the interaction with the media, or communication protocols on the pit wall. But he's the first to admit that some of the recent positives are down to work that was already well underway before he arrived, and some elements of what we are seeing right now are easy to trace back to Horner-era Red Bull. Car design decisions behind recent success were calls made well before Mekies got his feet under the desk at Milton Keynes. The ultra-low downforce Monza rear wing critical to Verstappen turning the tables on McLaren at the Italian Grand Prix was signed off almost 12 months ago, after the team's torrid 2024 Monza weekend. The original version of it even ran under Horner's watch at the British Grand Prix in July, when it was widely talked about inside the Red Bull garage as being the Monza upgrade. That wing helped Verstappen grab pole position at Silverstone too, but it wasn't ideal for the Sunday rain. Off track, some new sponsorship deals both recently announced and still under wraps for now were actually finalised by Horner and former Chief Marketing Officer Oliver Hughes. They were a savvy commercial pairing, pulling in plenty of sponsors and partners over the years. We won't see how Mekies matches up until deal renewal time. But there are also plenty of areas where Red Bull is tangibly different under Mekies. One big change is that all the speculation about Verstappen's immediate future has stopped. With a crunch point looming for an exit clause potentially being triggered, talk of him departing from Mercedes as early as 2026 just wouldn't go away in the first half of the year. But within 2 races of Mekies' arrival, Verstappen publicly committed his future to Red Bull for the first time. That may have happened regardless, as Belgian Grand Prix results ensured Verstappen would be at least 3rd in the Drivers' Championship at the summer break, so couldn't trigger his contract exit clause. But the noise around Verstappen's future certainly quickly stopped. Some of this was down to personal situations. Verstappen's father Jos is known not to be a fan of Horner, so a change at the top was always going to alter the dynamics behind the scenes. And whatever the ultimate trigger for it, Verstappen's guaranteed commitment for 2026 meant he and Mekies can focus on their immediate future being together, and this has had a calming influence in the team. Verstappen has also embraced Mekies being more engineering minded than Horner, which Max thinks has had a positive impact on race weekends, saying after Monza that engineering meetings and decisions now feel more methodical. Before then, Red Bull had what Verstappen called races where we were just shooting left and right a bit with the setup and making quite extreme changes, which shows that we were not in control. It does appear that since Mekies' arrival, the wild swings that we often saw between Red Bull's difficult Friday form and the rest of its weekend have gone. That wasn't a good thing in Hungary. The team got itself into totally the wrong setup window on Friday and could not unwind things. Mekies admitted that became an extremely poor weekend, which wasn't fair on the drivers. But in Italy, Red Bull built momentum from a strong Friday towards a brilliant win. Sometimes an engineering background and methodical approach could imply being risk-averse and playing safe. Mekies is trying to do the opposite. He wants to stress test the Red Bull organisation with some gambles now while it's not in a title fight to help work out where it's gone off course since its dominant heyday. The Monza win swung on a critical call that Verstappen pushed through ahead of qualifying, and over which Mekies was sceptical but allowed in this spirit of trying things out. The new Monza-specific wing package already looked good enough on Friday to make McLaren seem vulnerable, but for the final FP3 runs, Red Bull went further still with an aggressive cutout of the upper flap, a gamble for better top speed, but a downforce cut that might make the corners dicey. It worked, but also set off alarm bells about the risks for the race. Yes, Verstappen was now 6 to 8 km per hour faster down the straights, but he was slower in the middle sector where most of Monza's corners are, and up to 10 km per hour slower around the parabolica. The car balance also felt worse and required more gymnastics at the wheel from Verstappen. More sliding would surely equal more tyre degradation in the race. With the less aggressive wing having also looked competitive in the Friday long runs, would the cut version be a risk too far? As debate raged amid some technical team's scepticism, Verstappen stood firm, and in Mekies' words asked Red Bull to find other solutions to give him the balance back while keeping the trimmed wing. More wing angle was added at the front to help rotation into the corners. It all seemed counter to what a normal setup approach would be, but Verstappen was adamant he could make it work, and he duly did so with a win from pole. And on tyre choice, Red Bull picked an extra hard in its allocation to give it another option to roll the dice in the race. That approach meant sacrificing a soft, so it had to make an aggressive commitment to get through both Q1 and Q2 with one soft, which as Mekies said, could have looked a bit stupid but worked out. Red Bull has always been operationally sharp, whether it's been dominant or not. The Spa sprint win it took with Verstappen in Mekies' first weekend in charge was achieved by making sure it put Verstappen out of his garage between the two McLarens at the end of qualifying. Lando Norris had to overstress his tyres pulling away to avoid giving Verstappen a tow, so McLaren couldn't achieve a front row sweep, and Verstappen then beat Oscar Piastri off the line at the start, made the most of another low downforce setup to stay ahead, and took Red Bull's only F1 win of any kind between May and September. That was a classic Red Bull trick. Keeping that spirit and also trying a few fresh gambles under Mekies is a combination that's already paying off. Any change of leadership in an organisation means everything it does gets put under the spotlight again and is reassessed. Mekies is clearly doing that, and understandably so given Red Bull's gone from dominant to being beaten. But his appraisal isn't being done in a top-down way. Horner felt the way to get the best out of the Red Bull machine was to be the big boss who rules over everything. Instead, Mekies is presenting himself as a facilitator for others to show their talent. That is why communications may be different on the pit wall, why the engineers are being questioned in a different way, and why Red Bull perhaps is not as much in the media spotlight as it was when Horner was there. It also explains Mekies' strange zero answer when he was asked what his contribution to the Monza win was. He went straight to crediting the 1,500 people working on making that car faster. Mekies has proved from the off to be very personable, but Horner had been in place for 20 years and shapes the whole team in his vision. Many at Red Bull had huge loyalty to him, and some still feel sad at his exit. However affable and collaborative Mekies is, replacing Horner will not be a simple task, and strong relationship bonds cannot all be built quickly. It might take months or even years in some cases. And things Mekies tries to do differently will inevitably be questioned, especially if Red Bull has more miscues like Hungary than triumphs like Italy. Mekies will rapidly face a big decision even before the massive challenge of F1's all-new rules coinciding with Red Bull's all-new in-house engine program next year. Who else should be in that 2026 Red Bull Ford alongside Verstappen? As Yuki Tsunoda's old Racing Bulls boss, Mekies was expected to be a strong ally for Red Bull's struggling second driver, and perhaps even someone who can unlock what was holding him back. But Red Bull's discovering a different problem with Tsunoda to his predecessors. Where it was the qualifying gulfs to Verstappen that doomed Sergio Perez and Liam Lawson, very rapidly in Lawson's case, Red Bull is pretty happy with how close Tsunoda is to Verstappen in qualifying, when their car spec differences are considered, and given factors such as Tsunoda going out first in Monza qualifying to help Verstappen with a tow, then not getting one himself. It's Tsunoda's messy Sundays and poor race pace that are frustrating Red Bull, whereas Perez sometimes managed to salvage reasonable results in races even after making his life hard in qualifying. Tsunoda's weekends go in the opposite direction, and then scrapes like he had with Lawson at Monza don't help. Red Bull wants to decide Verstappen's 2026 teammate by the Mexican Grand Prix at the end of October. Isaac Hadjar's great recent run for Racing Bulls would logically make him a no-brainer promotion, but Red Bull's burned through so many drivers who looked great elsewhere recently that it needs to tread carefully. And while Verstappen's future is settled for 2026, exit clauses will soon crop up again if Red Bull doesn't make a good start to the new rules era. That enormous rule change, the totally unproven new engine program, the second driver conundrum, and the prospect of another round of Verstappen to Mercedes talk, plus how on earth Red Bull would adequately replace him if that happened, it's all looming on the horizon. It's only in crisis that leadership is truly tested.